demon whose name is Legion into the pigs, and they're running down into the sea. This is the Jordan River where it enters the Sea of Galilee and then exits. And more or less everything on that side of the Jordan River and the Sea of Galilee literally was the other side that Jesus spoke of and that you hear referenced in the Gospel several times. And it was very much like our metaphor of the other side of the tracks. Over there is where the pagans were, which is why you find the pig farmers, for example, which you would have never found among remotely observant Jews. That was the other side, in literally and figuratively. Right here, right about square in the middle, is Capernaum, which was essentially Jesus' home base in the Galilee, because there we find the home of Peter's mother-in-law, which was, it seems, it was one of the earliest house churches that we had in the years after Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension. Right up here then is more of a traditional site. There's not really a lot that pinpoints the event that this commemorates, other than it looks like it would have been a great spot for this to have happened. The preaching of the Sermon on the Mount from that location. But these two actually have a rather long tradition attached to them. This is where we were last night with the mosaic of the loaves and fish in the church I showed you there. And then just literally just right up the road is where this John 21 story is commemorated. And as I'm going to show you, if you might recall, I suggested last night that the location of the feeding of the 5,000 where the mosaic is, maybe not so much. More likely, I think, up the road at the same place that commemorates John chapter 21. And just for reference, while we're on this map, before we move to the story in John 21, right over here is Magdala, which is the hometown of Mary Magdalene, which is just a fancy way of saying Mary of Magdala. And there's actually ongoing archaeological work there now. There is a synagogue, a first century, i.e. time of Jesus, synagogue that's been uncovered there that we now visit. And just since my last visit, which was 2 years ago, a second synagogue has also been found in Magdala and is, as of right now, being uncovered. It seems that the one that we already have, that I've been taking groups to, was kind of more over in the business district, if you will, of Magdala, where this one they've just stumbled across seems to have been more out with the folks who actually live there, the common folk who were the residents of Magdala. But anyway, here to this Church of the Primacy. It's sometimes called the Primacy of Peter. And primacy of Peter comes from John 21, with Jesus kind of singling out Peter as the one that, you feed my sheep, you tend to my flock. That's the primacy piece in the name here. Beautiful little church, as you see here. And I'll just show you a few different shots of it. That's beautiful right there with the entrance to the church and the Sea of Galilee right here beside it. More and more, this is becoming one of my just favorite places anywhere to spend some time at it. Just to visit this church and remember this story and just be there on the shore. It's a profoundly peaceful place. You'll see there's a couple other shots, but just to point out here, these are actually the steps and part of the foundation of the original church, which dates back to shortly after the time of Jesus. There's a pilgrim known as Agaria that traveled over the Holy Land in the very, very early 300s and kept extensive journals, some of which we have information from to this day, that noted holy sites already being visited frequently by pilgrims. And this is one such site that Agaria notes these steps, notes these heart-shaped pillar bases that you can still see over here, and notes a certain stone inside here that was being venerated already at that point in time, which I think may be more likely the stone on which Jesus may have multiplied the loaves and fish. I'll show you the inside here in just a moment. So this is the altar area. And this large stone that you see protruding that the church is literally built around is the venerated stone inside that I'm talking about. And the Latin on the sign there, you can't really make it out, but it's Mensa Christi, which in Latin is the table of Christ. So again, referring to the feeding of the 5,000, the stone upon which, the table upon which, if you will, Jesus may have multiplied the loaves and fish. So the site is connected to that miracle story, but it's also connected to the John 21 text. But again, this would have been going back to the familiarity theme. If this was the place for the feeding of the 5,000, then certainly it would have been a significant, familiar, reassuring kind of a place to come back to after everything that had happened and to remember what happened here. So the fact that the two stories are linked here, I think, is some of the evidence to point to it as being authentic. This is a statue that's outside, and this is meant to be Jesus and Peter kneeling down, and then the plaque down there says, "Feed my sheep," from John 21. And then there you can see a little bit better close-up of those steps of the original and the foundation of the original church, at least as early as the 300s, if not earlier, probably earlier, for it to have already been there and established well enough for the pilgrim in Gary to make note of it. And I just want to share this with you. It's just a beautiful shot there of the sun, the Sea of Galilee, and the church all in one view there.
Isn't that whole setting around a park?
Not so much a park. I mean, it's just a section of. Well, okay, yeah. Because there's that. I know what you're referring to. There, it's a long path, and on either side, yeah, it's very nice. But it's basically. I mean, it's the church property. It's just very well kept, and it's got, in the midst of where Larry's talking about the beautiful lawns and things on both sides, particularly on one side, they've got several covered areas with seating where groups can gather and celebrate Holy Communion or read this story as we're about to, which I actually always do there. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. So let's just keep that in on the screen and turn to John 21. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, aka the Sea of Galilee, and showed himself in this way. Gathered there together were Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples. Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." Again, tumultuous time that they were in. What do we do sometimes when we're dealing with a lot? We turn to what's soothing, familiar. I know for me, it's going out and jumping on one of my tractors and plowing some ground, even whether it needs it or not. I've got a picture out of a drawing outside my office in the church that says, "Sometimes the best therapist has an engine and four wheels," and it's a picture of a tractor. They said to him, "We'll go with you." In other words, that sounds good. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them, and though there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come, have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. So let's pause there for just a moment. That's at verse 14. And just note a few things. Again, going back to my suggested thread of the familiarity piece, but also Jesus meeting people where they are and knowing that it is often comfort and familiarity that people need. These guys go fishing. And as you well know, just going fishing can be quite peaceful, but it is a little bit more fun when you catch something, right? And so I think even that is a clue that Jesus knew these guys needed a little good old-fashioned, relaxing, satisfying downtime. In fact, I would argue that's what the Sabbath is all about. We tend to make the Sabbath, and again, this goes back to the language piece, we tend to make the Sabbath about doing nothing. No work, nothing. Well, yeah, no work. But the point of the Sabbath is not doing nothing. The point of the Sabbath is in the word Shabbat. The verb in Hebrew means to cease. But what it means to cease is to cease what you do most of the rest of the week that earns your living, that you have to do certain hours and all kinds of certain things with. Cease from doing that and free yourself up. Maybe to do nothing, but not necessarily. It may be to do something else that is relaxing, fulfilling, enjoyable, that you do because you just love to do it, not because you have to earn a paycheck. That's what Sabbath is about, that kind of renewing, refreshing activity. Doesn't have to be doing nothing. Can be, but doesn't have to. I think this was kind of a Sabbath experience for these guys. Come have breakfast, Jesus said. Speaking of comfort, how I guarantee you every single one of you here have numerous, very pleasant memories of gatherings around food with church or friends or family or all the above. And in terms of the Gospels and in terms of Jesus himself, how many times do we find Jesus doing table fellowship with folks, which gets him in trouble frequently, right? Look at him over there. Look at those people he's eating with. It's another way of Jesus meeting people where they were. Not hiding and saying, "Come over here, let's hide and we can talk over here." No. Well, yeah, let's sit down and eat right here, right now. And finally, which I think again is a tie between the feeding of the 5,000 and also after the Last Supper, and now what's going on here with Jesus connecting with the disciples. these two specific words that John uses in verse 13. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them. Those are Eucharistic words. Those are words of the Last Supper. Taking bread and giving. It's almost another, well, it is. It's a breakfast. I was going to say another supper, but it's another sacred meal that they're sharing here with Jesus taking and giving, and not just the bread, but again doing the same thing with the fish, which is the tie to the feeding of the 5,000. Both bread and fish given by Jesus at this particular place. So then we had verse 14 saying that this was the third time Jesus had appeared to the disciples since he was raised from the dead. And then verse 15, they finished breakfast, and then we get to that really interesting part. Jesus says to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time, he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." So what is going on there? Well, I think here is a nice illustration of the biblical language being a huge help in answering that question. And this is true for Hebrew. It's probably more true for Greek. That whereas in English we have, the word feed. It is what it is. It means feed and love as a verb. In other languages, you may have multiple verbs to use to say feed someone or love someone, and that is exactly what's going on here. There are two different verbs being used when Jesus asks, "Do you love me?" In verse 15, Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" using the verb agapao. And the kind of love that is indicated there is very profound, deep, committed, serious love. Right? It's the love that Jesus has for us and for the church. Peter, do you love me that way? Peter's response, however, is with a different verb in Greek for love. The verb that Peter responds with, "Yes, Lord, I love you," is phileo, which you might say is more brotherly love. All right? I might say to, if I were to use a Greek verb, I might say to my wife, "I agapao you." I would say to Brad, however, "I phileo you, man."
Right on.
Love you, brother. Two different, you see what I mean? Two very different ways of expressing, indicating love. Jesus asks with the very intimate, close, committed one. Peter responds, yeah, I love you, man. Second go round is essentially the same interchange, the same exchange in verse 16. Jesus sticks to that very close, intimate verb. "Peter, do you agapao me?" And Peter comes right back the same way. Yeah, love you, brother. But what's telling then is in verse 17, the third exchange, when Jesus asks, Jesus himself switches to the more brotherly love verb and says, and of course I'm adding a bit here. Okay, Peter, do you phileo me? And Peter responds again, yes, I phileo you, brother. I think that is a beautiful illustration, again, of Jesus meeting someone where they are, at the point to which they are willing or even able to go. You know, Peter is an interesting character. Back right after the Transfiguration, he gets it right just for one gleaming moment when he says for the first time on anybody's lips, Jesus, you are the Son of God. And then Jesus starts to explaining what that means. Well, that means I got to suffer and die. And Peter has a fit. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And then Peter seems to be really hanging in there for a while. But then we have his threefold denial. Right? Late Maundy Thursday, early Good Friday. And now here we are again. Jesus knows that Peter's a complicated guy. And I think Jesus would like for Peter to have genuinely been able to respond, yes, Jesus, I agapao you. But I think here Jesus realizes, okay, you're not there yet. That's all right. And Jesus then switches to the verb that Peter is using. Jesus makes that step. Jesus doesn't keep throwing the agapao. Come on, man, come on, you can do it. No. All right, I'm going to step over here where you are. And it doesn't mean we're going to stay there, but it means that's where Jesus is going to meet us. The beautiful hymn, just as I am. Well, yeah, we come to Jesus. Jesus comes to us where we are, but we don't stay that way. When we come to the communion table just as we are, but we don't leave as we were. Jesus meets us in those places so that he can bring us somewhere else that we can, Psalm 23, return into the house of the Lord. And that's different for all of us, our situations. Again, I think about the women at that recovery house, how they're in the same journey, but boy, are they at different points and have been brought there from totally different sets of circumstances. And they just need somebody to meet them where they are, for who they are, and be with them. Sit with them, walk with them, and let them determine very much so the pace of the walking, and kind of take it from there. And I think that's what Jesus knows so well about us, that's the way we